another Coffee with Kilroy, or what I like to call, you guessed it, Beverage in a Book. My beverage? Well, coffee. Not a big surprise there. The book, though, may be a surprise. I decided to change things up a little bit, and today I'm going to talk about timetables or historical timelines or timeline books that portray history. To me, these are something I've always been fascinated with and pick up from time to time, and they kind of reinforce my interest in history and especially in military history, to the extent they are cover specific wars or periods of military history, and they all kind of started with this one right here. I got this one long time ago. This is copyright 1964, so before my birth. But I can't remember if it was like my mom's or my grandfather's, or my grandfather was a printer for the Chicago Tribune and then the Kansas City Star. So he got books all the time and got his pick of whatever books were left over from the review desk at the newspaper. But I can't remember if this was his or my mom's book, but I picked it up and I carried this around like some people carry around, a Bible or the U.S. Constitution or something like that. I was just always fascinated with this little book. I liked the size of it and how kind of laid things out. You had your timetable of the Earth there and prehistory of man, and it was just it was a Random House vest pocket book, Great Events of World History. And it was just that. It's just a timetable of history with just little entries, the date, and then the history, rule of the first and second dynasties of Egypt. That was the first entry in this. And then it just kind of went from there. No, chapters or context or, breakdowns of periods. It was just a book starting at the beginning of recorded time, I guess, in the eyes of this little book, all the way up to present day history. Of course, this was 64, so it didn't go that far up to the history. And it actually had an index to it of some great people or events or historical people. And I think the last event here had a relatively long index there. But the last event in this was, to give you some context, was 1961. Term of John Fitzgerald Kennedy as 35th President of the United States. He is assassinated in Dallas, Texas on November 22nd. So last entry is JFK's assassination. So that kind of gives you some context of the history of this book. But I always found this fascinating. It was kind of a neat little reference book that you can pull out and just start reading certain entries and getting an idea of what was going on. You could just like flip open to a page like here, 732 Battle of Tours or Poitiers. Charles Martel defeats the Muslim and arrests their invasion of Europe. So I don't know. It all kind of started with this, and then I started kind of collecting some of these books over time and just kind of looking at them and using them as reference sometimes. But, it was more of a curiosity. I mean, nowadays with the internet and Siri or whatever device you want to use, you can just spout something out. What happened in 732 and get some entry from somewhere. So not as, unique or interesting or relevant, I guess, as time has gone on and we've gotten different tools and reference materials. But, I still kind of like these books. And I'll pick them up from time to time. I think I picked this one up at a used bookstore maybe. I'm always kind of on the lookout for stuff like that. But this is a little bit more broken up, into periods: early civilizations, classical world, Middle Ages, Renaissance, Age of Kings, Age of Revolutions. And stuff like this kind of gave me some context on history of like, what are some of the periods and why are these periods called that? Why is there a classical period? Why is there Middle Ages? And what is unique about those different periods? And so these timetable books kind of gave me a little bit of a framework or context to start looking at some of those periods in a different light. I wasn't a history major. My undergraduate degrees are political science and geography, which, geography kind of encompasses a lot of different aspects and has some history, and of course political science does as well. But I didn't really take a lot of history in college. I took a lot of history and that was kind of my primary subject in high school. But and it's always been a fascination and hobby, and especially military history has picked that up over time. But at the college level, I didn't, get too in depth into it, except for kind of my own self-study on time. And a lot of my self-study, over time, especially post-college, was, through games, especially through, military history and games. This book, kind of has some narrative text and talking about certain subjects, and then you have kind of a timeline of that period off to the side. So it has some, similarities with my little Great Events of World History book, but it goes into a little bit more detail. But again, this is not, exhaustive in any respect, and this is more of a survey or cursory or high-level view of history and time. But just the ability to kind of look at time summarized and look at vast periods of time in a very summary fashion and kind of page through it quickly. I don't know. It just that has always appealed to me, of being able to kind of get a quick read. Now, none of this is in depth. None of this is going to give you the full picture, but this is a jumping off point, kind of a starting point, kind of a taster. Oh, that looks interesting, and then if it strikes my curiosity enough, then I'll go in and read a little bit more. I'll find another source, find a book, do some more research. And in a lot of respects, what I ended up doing is finding a game on it over time. So this is a little bit interesting book. It a little bit more information and breakdown of events and history than my initial little book, but still not much more than that. And I think I picked this one up in one of my history. I was a big joiner or member of like a military book club or the history book club, sci-fi book club, and I would join and do the minimum and cancel and rejoin again. And I think I got this in either a military history or a history book club back in the day when those were a thing. I know I'm dating myself, but and this was an interesting one. It's paperback, but it's huge, and it kind of laid it out. It had a different classification. It had these top chapters like history and politics, literature and theater, religion, philosophy, visual arts, music, science and technology, daily life. And then you go through the time periods, and then it would have like just a list of little events. So actually, overall, less information, than these in some respects, because you didn't get it like a little time entry. These were more of just a title of something, but the context of where it was categorized kind of gave you its relevance. So this was relevant to visual arts, or this was relevant to science and technology, and the like. And so this is a relatively thick book, but there's a lot of blanks, right? Because there's nothing nothing relevant to music in 1624. Tell that to those people back then. But so this was a little bit different cut, or a different perspective on time and the way it was categorized and codified and kind of put down here. And of course, this is subjective in that the editors of this are deciding what events they think are relevant to music or relevant to science and putting down their entries in here. So, you're getting an author's perspective, even though it's not really, much information or prose, but you're still getting the editor's perspective on what they think is important or what's relevant. but it also gives you a jumping off point. Like, oh, I might want to, let's see, that 1021 daily life. What does that mean? I might want to look up that and figure out what the relevance of that was. But you got a lot of blank spaces in here, so it wasn't the most efficient way of kind of portraying this information, but it definitely is a way to portray the information. A lot of the military history was in the history and politics. A lot of that, that's where the military history was kind of played out. Like right here, you've got the first Punic War and some of those battles and the like there. So this was, timetables of history, interesting book, in a different way of kind of portraying these timetables, but still, again, all these are going to be very high level, very cursory and more of a survey type approach. Then we get into some specific time charts, and I pulled up two that I have. I think I have a couple more hiding somewhere down in my library, my dungeon. But this one is dealing with the Civil War. So it's the time chart of history of the Civil War. So you're going to get, give me some coffee here. You're going to get a little bit more context, text, narrative about the events or the battles or the people than you're going to get in those other books. Those others are really just lists, right? Just time entries. This one has a little bit more context. Again, no substitute to a good book, on the Civil War or on a particular battle or a particular general or campaign. This is not going to replace that. But, I mean, it is a little bit more detailed than you get in just a typical, survey type book. And I'm going to go up a little bit here because there's some fold outs and stuff, so you get the full picture here of what is of what's going on. So this is just dealing with the Civil War. So you've got some context or the index here of what it's going to cover, but then you go into some a little bit more of a general history, the history of the Civil War. So you've got some reading, you got some images here. So visually, it's appealing, and it's more of a kind of a again, more of a overall general reference text on some of this stuff there. I think there's a fold out here. Yeah, here this is. And this one has some fold out. So look, there's an interesting book there. It's the, kind of knock over my coffee here. The Strategic Panorama of the Civil War, showing major campaigns. That's a little bit interesting. You've got a little timeline off to the left here of showing certain battles on that page right there. So this has a little bit more of that kind of, there's the full panorama right there. So this, as I said, there's a little bit more fold outs here. You've got battles listed on each wing here, but then you've got a little bit of a map showing stuff there. So, I mean, that's a little interesting. It almost gives you a little bit of an atlas feel. And that might be another coffee with Kilroy that I might do is atlases. Oh, I've got, for every one timeline book, I probably have 5 atlases, if not 10. I collect atlases. It's the geographer in me. I collect all kinds of atlases, military history, politics, you name it. I've got an atlas on it. So this one has a little bit more text in it, and these type of books, when I'm kind of overgeneralizing, but I know there's more than one type of timelines out there that cover different periods and different battles. It gives you a little bit more of a general read on the topic or an overview, and then and then you'll get into some timelines in it. So this one has quite a bit in here, and then you're going to get into there's some biographies or little entries on the leaders of the Civil War, and then you get into the actual timeline. So this is the Army of the Potomac. You've got a military organization of the chart. You've got a timeline kind of setting out some of the approaches of the war, and then you're going to get into a timeline of the war itself here. And then these are a series of kind of fold-outs. You'll get a fold-out of some information or kind of a little inset, and then you've got, you've continued on with this timeline. This is May 1861, and you've got politics. You've got war in the East and war in the West. So you've got different theaters, and then the overall politics of it. So it kind of like set up like that one timeline book where it had the different topics on the top. This one has it on the side, and you kind of follow it over. Here's the timeline of the West, the East, and then politics. And you've got images in here and little vignettes. And again, you're back to the editor's point of view on what they think is important and what they think is a relevant event in that period. So these are always kind of interesting. You get little, vignettes or insets like firearms, talking about that a little bit. And there's a lot, quite a bit of imagery in here. So again, these are a different kind of book to look at or to, use as a reference. To me, it's more of just a little bit of a nostalgia of looking at it. I mean, as a reference, there's much better references and much better ways probably to research that now with the internet. But this one's kind of a throwback to, back in the day where a highly produced piece like this was kind of a coffee table book, but also a coffee table book with some substance in it. There's cavalry. Treating the wounded, and again, you've got the same timeline going on all along here as you look through. I've been kind of flipping through here, but you've got like here, and then it looks like we've got a second timeline here. What did the blue pop up? That's the Bull Run campaign. It's interesting. And then you go back to the War of the East. So you've got different, still have politics, War of the East, War of the West. Looks like you've got some different colors here that pop up. Maybe they're subsets of those. Oh, Naval War. So this dark purple is the Naval War. So you got a little different timeline popping up there. So you can look at the naval events, and I find those interesting, how things are classified, and just looking at it. Well, let's look at it from the naval perspective, what was going on, or let's look at what's going on in the East, or what was going on from the political standpoint during this time frame. And so you've got you've got your months and years at the top, and then you've got individual events and where they kind of fit on that timeline, and then you've got, of course, images throughout here. So I mean, it's yet a different way to portray the timeline, but still interesting. And of course, you have a lot of fold-outs in here. Here's artillery and some imagery, and talks a little bit about that. Again, none of this is definitive or super informative, but again, from a high-level point of view, it's interesting. And I do like the timelines because they give you a sense of context of what was going on, and like, oh, I didn't realize that was going on at the same time this was going on in those different theaters. So anyway, maybe that's just me, but and I've said before on other segments that war games, or any game of historical board games, are kind of like mini time machines. It's our ability to kind of go back in the past and relive, or at least view or get a perspective on what was going on then. Again, a lot of times through the lens of the designer, but still you're getting a feel for what it was like, or what that conflict was like back then. And these timelines kind of give me some of that same feel. Like you can transport back in a date and see what was going on in that date, and get a little bit of feel for that. And again, maybe that's just me. Here's the Blue Water Navies. So you've got a lot of these little insets that talk about stuff, but then you've got this ongoing timeline. And then you got some major campaigns here, like here's the Overland campaign, here's the Shenandoah Valley campaign. We're in May of 1864 there. So this kind of gives you some context as well with, campaigns, battles, and the time period, and where it relates with what else was going on during that period. The Naval War is starting to peter out a little bit here in 64. And it's not even covered here in the later part of 64 and getting into 65 there. So anyway, just paging through this. So and then you've got this little Civil War fact finder. So this is kind of an index to this, right? So if you wanted to look at something specific, or where is that? These are really, really hard to search, right? I mean, unless you know the exact date, like, oh, that was September of 64, you might be able to find it in there. But if you're looking for something, if you don't have the kind of the date narrowed down or the year, then this is another way to kind of look at it, like per person or event or something. You have these little flip index here in the middle that can kind of get you to it. And here's the organization of the Army of Northern Virginia. You know, we had the one earlier. And then this one actually gets into some battles, like here's First Bull Run. And so you're getting a little bit of kind of the Osprey treatment. You know, I get a few of those Osprey books, and they kind of lay out the battles like this. And so you're getting a little bit of that treatment in some of these battles here. So, I mean, this book right here is, you know, kind of scratches a lot of itches. I mean, you kind of get an overall time view of it. You get some little bit of detail on some of the battles, at least some visuals here. You've got some context of the whole chronology, so you can kind of put this in the right order or the right place. So anyway, yeah, here's Gettysburg. So I kind of like this timeline book because it's almost kind of like a little mystery bag. You know, you can pick it up and what's interests you today and just kind of page through it and kind of get a little bit of a higher level view of something. And it's a jumping off point, right? You say, well, you know, I need to research that. That looks interesting. I might want to research the Battle of Chattanooga a little bit more. So anyway, so that time chart of history of the Civil War. And then the last one I was going to talk about here, this is a similar book to the Civil War, but this is all a military history. And so this is a little bit, this is, 3000 BC to the present. It's forward by David Chandler of Napoleonic history fame. So this book is somewhat similar to the Civil War, but it's for all of history. So it's talking about weapons, warfare and weapons, time charts, great commanders. It's got an A to Z of battles. It's got one of those little flip index to go through the battles that you can go research for that. Then you've got some chronology of certain wars and battles and battle maps. You know, again, kind of like that Civil War book. This is one of my favorite charts of all time. If you've never seen that one, that's just a great way to portray information. This is Napoleon's campaign, 1812 campaign into Russia. The gray, it shows both time and numbers, time, movement, and numbers. So it's conveying all kinds of different things on here. But the brown here is how many troops he started out with and kind of where they kind of spiked off at times. And then finally when he got to Moscow, and then his retreat back, and you see this just dwindle, and this is what he came back with. So so the thickness of these bands represent the number of troops, but you also see the time period. You got a little time scale here of when this is taking place, and you see the movement. I mean, you can see where things went and the tracks they took, and I don't know. I just find that fascinating that you can convey in a quick visual various amounts of information, and so I don't know. I like that, but I'm a geek. This is all about warfare and weapons. So you're getting a little bit of an overview. Again, this is more like a survey, very cursory. But you get some pics, and you get some descriptions of different things. So this is interesting. You gotta get to the tanks there. Everything's gotta have and your warships. Gotta get the heavy stuff. Then you get into the time chart here, and it has like a great geographical division, and then you'll get into the time frame here. So this is a little bit interesting, a little bit different way of doing it. I mean, it's got your time across the top, but then you've got like different civilizations here: Minoan, Mycenaean, Sumer, Egyptian or Sumer, Old Assyrian, Babylon, and then you've got events that are taking place in here. And again, this is focusing on military history, so it's not going to be bringing in art and humanities and that other stuff. This is, dealing with the military history. But you've got some of the key civilizations, and you've got kind of different bands here. So this is kind of interesting. And this is going to have fold-outs as well with little vignettes. This is talking about some great commanders of that period. So it's kind of cool there. And it just keeps on going here, right? So this is conveying a lot of different kind of information as well. And you got some imagery that's strewn throughout this. And again, every page is going to have, like, this is the great commanders of this period. So it gives you a little bit of a very top level survey of them. So you can kind of follow not only the regions and the time, but you can also follow some of the major civilizations or empires or cultures of the period. Like here's Eastern Han and how they broke up into the Wei, the Shu, and the Wu, three kingdoms there. So, and there's great commanders of that period. So this is a little bit different. I mean, it's very similar to that Civil War, but yet different in its own right. And you got some great commanders there. So I don't know. I like this book as well. It's a lot more chaotic or busy on the page, but there's some really interesting information in here as well. Then we're getting into the 1700s. There's good old George Washington. So he's in there. So there's Robert E. Lee. So we're into the Civil War here, era. At least the American Civil War, I should say. I think we know who that guy is. People know who that guy is. And then you get a little bit more of a overall biography on the great commanders, from the different periods. A little bit more of a top level discussion of them. Then there's this little great battles. I've got something noted here to check out, but this little flip chart here in the middle that you can kind of use as a reference. This right here is more of a. This isn't an index. This is just listing out the battle. So it lists out the battle, the date, and who the combatants were, who the leaders were. So this is a nice little, kind of buried in the middle of the book, a little battle chart or a list of major battles. And again, the major battles in the eye of the editors, right? And here's an A to Z of great naval battles, right? Key to nationalities. And then you've got yet a separate chronology that starts at the beginning of the time, and this is back to the books we start out with. These are just little lists here, just little almost titles, of leaders or battles or something going on, and you have this whole chronology that goes through, but this focuses on military history, so battles and leaders and campaigns and wars throughout time. And then you get into some of the battle maps. So here's Marathon and Thermopylae, the Hot Gates, and then Salamis. And so you've got, again, a little bit of a imagery on battle and a little bit of information on them, context, date, location, commanders, forces, objectives, casualties, victor, consequences. So again, very, very much of a survey. And I collect those books too. I might go into a whole nother copy of Kilroy of just battle books that just talk about, kind of keeping a list of battles, but talking about it in a very summarized sense of the combatants, the leaders, but also going into some kind of context. There's been a lot of books about, the decisive battles in history, or the 12 decisive, or the 20 decisive, or the 100 decisive battles, or battles that changed history. So I collect a lot of those books too. Again, very surfacey, very high level, but I don't know, I just find them interesting, again, as jumping off points and giving a wider view of their context, of all these battles or wars context, kind of taking a step back and looking at them at a summarized level. I feel like I get a little bit of a context of where they fit into the greater scheme of things. And then I can dive in. I can do one of my deep dives. I can dive in a little bit deeper and find a book or a game that covers it in a little bit more detail. So here's some battles, some more. So there's, this is kind of interesting as well with some of these battle imagery. And again, this is just really a glorified coffee book. Then you've got some of these individual chronologies. That's kind of interesting. Here's Alexander the Great, Julius Caesar, the 100 Years' War. So it's not like a little mini chronology of just that period. And this is talking about politics, Low Country, Normandy, Brittany, Gascony, Burgundy, Spain, naval. So, I mean, it's showing different crosses or context over the time period and different events and people. And then you got these little battles or sieges, that are noted in on this as well. So it's got a nice little visual here. Here's the wars of Japan. Get another little inset. Here's the Napoleonic Wars. We've got a whole little inset here. The Colonial Wars. American Civil War. Hey, I can match that up with the other book. The First World War. Second World War, and this is going by fronts mainly. War in the Air. You get a different kind of perspective on this. War Today, Tomorrow. A little bit of a talk here. And then the future technologies and developments or under evaluation. Again, I don't know what the copyright on this is, so this is definitely outdated, but I don't know. This is, and then you get your bibliography. Then your military museums to go to in different countries there. So, I don't know. I find that to be an interesting book as well. So this was a long coffee with Kilroy. I hope you carved out some time in your day. Hope your boss isn't getting on you for taking a coffee break. This just say, hey, taking a coffee break with Kilroy. So that's what I had for you today. I've been thinking about doing this for a while. I can go out to some others ones. Maybe I'll do a part 2, but anyway, I thought I'd start with this. I pulled this off the shelf the other day, and I just remember, I carried this thing around with me. It had a dust cover, a kind of a shiny one, and I lost that years ago. And I don't know, that just brings back so many memories of time. See what I did there? Anyway, that's what I have for you today. Hope you found this interesting. If you didn't, you can just forward ahead, go skip to the next video. Or just leave it on in the background. I love people liking and watching my videos or just leaving it on. That helps me out. I don't know what that does. I don't know anything about algorithms, but anyway. Thanks for stopping by. Thanks for spending some time with me. Did it again. Love to know what you think about any of these books. Did these ever interest you, or do you think this is just a complete waste of time now, given all our resources and technology that we have nowadays? I'll leave that up to you. Anyway, thanks again for stopping by. Sorry for the long one. Pause and come back as often as you need to. But again, hey, really appreciate you stopping by, and hey, have a good one. Thanks for watching.